I'm just gonna start. Oh, I'm just gonna start recording if that's cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So what really inspires me about, the struggle that I'm following, that you are fighting for, is I had a conversation today with someone, and they were telling me, oh, with this cannabis thing that you're doing, I know how African governments work, and the only way they'll give in is, like, there's no projects that can happen without A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I was like, but that's not the case, like, we are fighting for the people, and we're fighting for a certain outcome that includes the people, and it was this person was basically telling me, I was on the wrong trajectory, and that, like, I should stop waging a war against the government and trying to fight, for cannabis legalization. I was like, dude, you have no idea, um, you know, because we have seen what happens when we let people who don't have the right intention and who don't care about the people make those decisions for us. And it's, for me, it's just inspiring to see the fight, even just in terms of the homophobia in Namibia, and that being, such a huge thing in society. And slowly that, even though there's a huge proportion of society who's severely homophobic, but there's huge support as well, for people being able to practice what they desire and who they want to love, and that the laws are changing around that. And it confirms that, sometimes we have to fight.
No, exactly. And fighting for what's right is always worth it.
Exactly. I truly believe this. And the other thing is, for me as well, I want to change the narrative, because this kind of like, oh, things only happen, when you give the government business opportunities. It's like, yeah, we have to change that narrative. Things can happen without, like, corruption, and without someone being paid off. Things can happen that work for the people, where the people benefit, and not those at the top and the ones who have the money.
Exactly. So now we forward we go, but Thursday is another same-sex marriage court case, and then in June there's another one, and then in August is the citizenship of children born to same-sex couples. So two big things ahead, and then we have Pride Month, so busy, but busy doing the right things for the country.
Yeah, amazing. Well done. That's really amazing. So one of the things I wanted to quickly touch on with you today is just in terms of, you're very involved and a big voice for the youth movement. And, for me, the reason why I advocate for cannabis legalization is in Namibia, because essentially I see it as an opportunity to be able to create a future for our future generations that can create industry, that can create jobs in a sustainable manner, where we don't have to rape our environment for oil, or cut down all the trees, or mine everything out of the earth, but in a more gentle way we can plant things and, create a healthy nature around us, as well as healthy people. We can make houses from cannabis that are a lot healthier to live in. People can have access to affordable, natural, good quality medicines in cannabis. There's all these opportunities that I see in this plant, that we can have the potential to create. And especially in terms of the youth, there's not a lot of opportunity in Namibia. And I see this as being able to build opportunity. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so you were talking about the youth movement, so I just want to touch on that first. So I grew up in Narraville, Wolfish Bay, which is a predominantly colored neighborhood because of systemic apartheid and whatnot. And I grew up where cannabis was very much ostracized and villainized and equated to um, a person, if people use it, their human dignity was invalid, their prosperity was cancelled, or they were just regarded as a social ill. So I was very much, I grew up with that connotation of cannabis and most importantly, people's use of cannabis. But I also grew up with news articles after news articles showing how young boys, how young colored and black boys are incarcerated and locked up for minor offenses. A $50 bag of weed, sending them to prison. $100 bag of weeds, giving them years-long sentences. And I also grew up seeing how they were profiled in these communities for a drug that's used by people across both racial and class backgrounds too. But one thing I will say, and one thing is evident, is that the war on cannabis in Namibia and the way public policy is used on cannabis in Namibia disproportionately affects the youth and disproportionately affects Black and colored youth. And it should be of major concern to people from these backgrounds, to young people, at how this policy is sending them to jail and changing the trajectory of their lives, so to say. So it's truly sad, and that's why I find myself supporting the legalization of cannabis. And not only the legalization, but the expungement of people's records who were sent to prison for minor offenses on cannabis. And to your point on opportunity, there's a big opportunity that we are missing out on. Also, we are missing out on leading Southern Africa into becoming, the leaders of the cannabis and hemp industry. Cannabis isn't just about weed. There's CBD properties, there's hemp properties that our climate is more than suited for. And it's a loss of revenue. We're seeing how the government waived processes and waived constitutional mandates to give a license to drill for Recon Africa for a resource that's going to become invalid in the future. And now we are seeing a government not even putting research into cannabis, not even changing the strict laws so that minor offenses can be waived. But we're also seeing them miss out on a big pot of $1 billion revenue that can lift people out of poverty. Because I'm an intersectional advocate, I just want to draw a connection here to LGBTQ rights, rights that also disproportionately affect the youth. When people ask the government what they're going to do on LGBTQ rights, they say things like, there's unemployment, there's poverty. Why are you talking about these issues? Gays are not oppressed in Namibia. Don't make an issue where there is none. Okay, fine, put that aside. Well, here you are criminalizing people of Black and colored backgrounds for using this plant, and you are restricting us from creating a revenue if you regulate the product properly. So there's a big pot of money that you can use to lift people out of poverty and to decrease the youth unemployment, which is at 42%, but you're not even doing that. So you're not giving people their LGBTQ rights, and you're not decriminalizing a product that disproportionately affects the young people. So that just shows that the government has a selective morality in this case.
And this is exactly what you're saying. This is the issue for me. This is like, I'm coming onto the 6th year of advocating for cannabis in Namibia. At the beginning, I wasn't very vocal at all. I was kind of, it's not a position that I like to be in because I'm putting myself as a target. But I would just go to government agencies, and explain to them the potential of cannabis and what is hemp and how could we, and there's been years and years of education of the government on this topic, and the sad thing is that I know for a fact, and soon I will be releasing that evidence, that they are doing deals behind closed doors, with prominent business people or with foreign investors, who promise them however much money that they will be making to be planting cannabis. And this is the issue as well. There is something that has been put to them that can help with youth unemployment, with industry creation, with reviving industry. You know, there's so many multi-sector opportunities, and they are ignoring that, even though we have these crises in Namibia, you know, and they're totally ignoring that. They're ignoring the evidence, they're ignoring the opportunities, you know, that we are, and there's always the kind of unrealistic, you know, thing of, oh, well, you know, cannabis is going to make everyone crazy, etc. Argument that they have.
Absolutely. One thing I'll say on that is when cannabis becomes legal, we as a Namibian society need to make sure we hold our government accountable for criminalizing the product and the effects of that criminalization. So we need to make sure that the profits made off of cannabis, the industry created, the job opportunities created through the industry, goes to the people that it affected the most during its criminalization. So that would be the indigenous communities that have used this plant but have not had access to it legally. That would be Black and colored youth, or Black and colored men that have been thrown into jail for using the product and for being disproportionately policed in their neighborhoods and being thrown into jail for, as I said, minor offenses. So we need to make sure that if the cannabis farms open, or the hemp factories open, or the cannabis cafes open, or you know, people who get licenses to start up a business selling cannabis, that those licenses go to the people that were affected by the war on cannabis in this country, first and foremost. Not the upper class, not the elite politicians, not the, you know, upper white class people who use cannabis as this at the same rate as Black and colored folks, but their neighborhoods don't get policed at the same rate, or they don't get locked up at the same rate as Black and colored Namibians do. So we need to make sure that the public policy around the legalization of cannabis benefits the people it harmed the most, and that we take the people out of jail who have served the time when it becomes legal and expunge the records, erase the records as an apology from the government for the war on drugs.
Yeah, I totally, this is what I'm advocating for. I totally agree with you, you know, and the thing is as well, I've had so much like full-on attacks from people, you know, where they're like offering me amounts of money, or, you know, wanting to use my expertise to get in with the government and going like, you're halting progress. And it's like, no, I'm not halting progress. The issue is that what you want to bring in will only, you know, allow white farmers to grow cannabis, you know, or get white farmers to have licenses, or those who have connections to the government to partake in this industry while everyone else sits in jail. I mean, this is what's happening in places like Lesotho, you know, where the rich, you know, from other countries have gotten themselves licenses while everyone else in the country is still being arrested for cannabis. And even in Namibia, you know, as we're speaking, there is continuous cannabis arrests, you know, and the police are targeting cannabis users. And essentially places, corporations within Namibia, like Dischem, Spar, the pharmacies, are selling CBD, which is a Schedule 5 prohibited substance, selling it on their shelves and making a profit, you know, with doing this with impunity, even though it has been mentioned to NMRC, even though it has been mentioned to the government, even though it has been mentioned to the police, to the Attorney General, to the Minister of Justice. You know, they are just blatantly ignoring this fact, but, you know, happily locking up everyone else. And this is exactly where I, you know, those morals are for me the most important. You know, I'm not here to please the government. You know, I don't have to be friends with the government. I'm here to stand for the communities and with the people, you know, those who have been harmed by prohibition in Namibia.
100%, 100%. And that is why it takes the community to hold them accountable. Unfortunately, sometimes officials in the government put profit over people and party over people, especially when there's such strong capitalist influence. So that is why it's important that a committee on a parliamentary committee holds a proper public hearing on this issue and invites community members like yourself to give them the evidence and to inform them on how the proper legislation should be drawn up. And that is why it's important for the community to step in now before we lose out on the harms done. So the government, if I can also change course here on our
Yeah.
commentary, I just also want to bring up harm reduction in a public health policy approach. By keeping the cannabis criminalized and illegal, it's actually harming our communities. It's doing more harm than good because, like I said, there's not enough research done on the effects of cannabis or enough research done to give people guidelines on how to effectively use it. Prohibition of alcohol, or alcohol was legalized because they saw that people were doing backdoor, I don't know how to say, like creation of alcohol, like in the
So yeah,
basements,
doing
and they were
unhealthy,
very,
unsafe
yeah,
products.
yeah, it was very unhealthy and harmful to them. So the best way is not prohibition, but regulation. Regulation of those products, proper regulation of those products, so that they are accessible to people who want to use them, but that they can use them in a moderated way and in a moderated fashion, so that consumers can know when they walk into a pharmacy, if they buy, or a dispensary, if they buy the products, it's not laced. It's certified by the government. The people get licenses and whatnot. So it's a public health issue. It's
Yeah.
a human rights issue, and regulation is better than prohibition. The facts are there for it. It's just the point that the government they don't want to stand up for the community in this point, or they've shown their selective morality on this matter.
That's exactly, it's selective morality, because I work with I do addiction treatment, and I work with communities, like people on the street who are homeless and addicted, and having tried to explain that, to people who work within the health sector and within our Ministry of Health, and somehow they ignore that fact that it has been shown effectively to reduce the harms. And another interesting thing, actually, I'm busy reading this book by Professor Carl Hart. It's called Drug Use for Adults. And it is essentially, the thing of, we as human beings have been given, the right, for example, in the American Constitution, each human being has the right to liberty, freedom, and pursuit of happiness. So if people choose to use a drug, or a substance or whatever it is to put into their body, as long as that use does not affect negatively, people around them, they should be allowed to do so, just like we are allowed to eat the foods we want, or drive in a motor vehicle, even though, that action in itself is very dangerous. We are still allowed to do it because, as consenting adults, we make those responsible choices. So I think, yeah, for me, harm reduction needs to be at the forefront of this conversation, but it's totally being ignored by our government, and by people within, Namibia is atrocious when it comes to harm reduction of any substance. We have absolutely no support in place. We have no welfare, for people with addiction, or, because we're not even focusing on the trauma that has come from, a place that has been colonized and has suffered under an apartheid regime. It's kind of just all been swept under the carpet, and people wonder why there's so much violence in Namibia and so much addiction. It is because there has been so much trauma which has never been addressed.
No, absolutely. And like I said, it's very much a public health issue. And if I can draw another connection to the LGBTQ movement, the longer we do not legalize LGBTQ rights is the longer we risk our service deliveries. So we just opened a new, for example, we've just opened a new medical school, but how many of those doctors are trained on sexual and reproductive health in the LGBTQ context? How many of them know how to do gender reaffirming surgery or hormone therapy, or treat lesbian and gays with their different bodily autonomy or sexual health they might need, that mainstream doctors, mainstream state agencies do not have the proper education and knowledge about? So with the same thing with cannabis, if we do not do the proper research or legalize it soon so that we can have harm reduction policies in place, our pharmacies, our hospitals, our mental health facilities are losing out on the proper time needed to facilitate the new introduction of this. And also, I will say that this substance is very much a harmful substance, a harmless substance.
Yeah.
We do not hear people getting into fights because they are using cannabis. We hear people getting into fights because of the criminalization of cannabis between the drug dealers, absolutely. So
Yeah.
legalizing it takes it out of the hands, out of the black market, and puts it into the light, and into the state regulated field.
Yeah.
So we do not hear people getting into fight for using cannabises. We do hear people abusing their partners in domestic relationships, their children, their community because of being drunk. We do hear people, so many car accidents or so many violence perpetuated from alcoholism, but yet the government allows that and doesn't have the amount of strict regulation on that they do on cannabis.
Yeah.
So why cannabis? Why? And let me also say that the illegal or the criminalization of cannabis in Namibia is racist. It is
Yeah,
inherently racist
it is.
because the global cannabis criminalization was started by colonizers, both in their own countries and in Africa, because we just took the penal codes from them. When white supremacists and explorers colonized the world, they saw how this herb was being used by tribes and cultures outside of Christianity. They went to the Americas and saw the Native Americans using this this herb cannabis in a medicinal fashion. They went to South America and saw how the indigenous people there were using cannabis in an indigenous fashion. And in Africa too, they saw the tribes using it for medicinal usage, for psychiatric usage, for healing properties as well. And because all of these countries that they colonized in the global south were countries with people of color, one, were countries where people did not practice Christianity, two, and they were countries where people practiced religion outside of Christianity, most importantly, religion based on spirituality.
Yeah.
And what did they do? They needed to enforce Christianity for power and control, and they policed different things. One of the things they policed was the use of cannabis because it was used in a spiritual nature to connect with the earth, to connect with the universe, and for healing properties. And that in Christianity doesn't have a mechanism to connect with God according to them, right? Where I do think people also use cannabis to connect with their faith in many different ways nowadays. But back then, they relegated it. They enforced penal codes to criminalize the herb or the plant, and they forced penal codes to criminalize other things like homosexuality, women working outside the household, and to enforce apartheid. So the criminalization of cannabis in Namibia is a racist policy that the Namibian government continues to perpetuate.
It is, and this is why this is so important. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. I totally agree with you, and this is why I think it's important for people to learn the history of prohibition. Why is it illegal in the first place? Why, was it prohibited? Sorry, Omar, I am running out of time. I've just had a look at the
No
time.
problem. Stay my side.
But so let's, if we can do a follow-up on this again. I think it's really important for the youth to get involved in this conversation. I know a lot of people in Namibia are scared of prosecution, so they don't want to voice their support. But I think there is strength in numbers, and we see what can happen when we stand together.
No, definitely, definitely. I'm always willing to help out when I can.
Thank you so much. It was really lovely to speak to you, and we will speak again soon.
Yes, thank you, Angela, and thank you so much for your work. We appreciate it. One day, liberation will come in the cannabis context.
Indeed. And thank you also for what you're doing, and keep on. I'm behind you guys.
Thank you. Together we will.
Indeed. Bye.
All right. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.